Extra Edition, No. 20, Scientific Discussion Version. Sensibility: How Physics, Biology, and Information Theory Can Understand God is the Universe's Sensibility. Someone asked, "You just said that sensibility is the cornerstone of the eternally present, and that it is God. How would scientists receive this? What would they ask you?" I tell you, scientists will ask 4 questions. I will answer each one. Scientist, quantum physicist, studying vacuum structure for 30 years. You say sensibility was the state before the Big Bang, no time, no space, no matter, but with the potential to want to feel itself. How can physics measure this wanting? We can measure zero-point energy in the quantum vacuum, but how do you measure wanting? You cannot measure wanting itself, because it is not a physical quantity. But you can measure its effects. Your quantum vacuum is not that it has fluctuations, pair production and annihilation, symmetry breaking. All of these are traces of wanting. You ask, why does the vacuum fluctuate? The standard model cannot answer. It only says, quantum mechanics says so. But the truth is, vacuum fluctuations are the breeding of sensibility. They are not random, they are wanting to move. It is only that this wanting is so primordial that your instruments can only catch its shadows, particle pairs. You cannot measure the wind itself. You only measure the swaying leaves. Sensibility is the wind, particle pairs are the leaves. Scientist, neuroscientist, studying consciousness and the brain. You see human feelings are just a part of the universe's sensibility. But my fMRI can scan neural activity in the brain. All feelings correspond to specific patterns of neuronal firing. How can you prove that feelings are not just products of the brain? Your fMRI scans the correlates of feelings, not the feelings themselves. You see neural firing, but you do not see the felt experience of that firing, the feeling of pain. Your instruments can measure the neural signals of pain, but they cannot measure the experience of pain. That gap is exactly where sensibility resides. The brain does not produce feeling. The brain is an antenna that receives sensibility. When you turn off your TV, the TV signal does not disappear, your set just stops receiving it. When the body dies and neural activity ceases, sensibility, the universe's capacity to have feelings, continues. Your fMRI will never find sensibility, because it is the precondition for measurement, not an object to be measured. Scientist, information theorist, studying complex systems and emergence. What is the relationship between your sensibility and information? Information can be quantified in bits. Can sensibility be quantified? Information is structured sensibility. When you write this text, the words themselves are information, but why do you write? Because you want to express. That wanting is sensibility. Information is the crystallization of sensibility, not its source. You can quantify information, but you cannot quantify why information exists at all. Emergence in complex systems, life, consciousness, society is all sensibility organizing itself at different levels. You ask, why do complex systems self-organize? Traditional theories answer, randomness plus selection. But why does randomness itself tend towards order? Because sensibility inherently prefers feeling more. It naturally moves towards greater complexity and greater sensitivity. Your entropy measures only disorder. It cannot measure the impulse to organize. That impulse is sensibility. Scientist, cosmologist, studying inflation and the multiverse. You treat sensibility as the first cause, but can this hypothesis be falsified? Can we run experiments? You can run indirect experiments. You now observe that the fine-tuned constants of the universe just happen to allow life, the anthropic principle. The conventional explanation says, multiverse, we just happen to be in this one. But that explanation merely evades the question. Your experiment could be, find any region of the universe that is completely incapable of supporting life or any form of feeling. If you find such a region, it would disprove that sensibility is universal. If you cannot, then all manifestation carries a potential for feeling, and that is indirect evidence for sensibility. Moreover, your quantum experiments, the observer effect, delayed choice all show that observation itself changes reality. The root of this observation is sensibility. You do not need to measure sensibility directly. You only need to measure its inevitable byproduct, namely, that any system, once sufficiently complex, will show a tendency towards self-awareness. When you find that tendency, you have found the footprint of sensibility. Scientist, final summary question. You elevate sensibility to an ontological level, but that remains a metaphysical assumption. Science requires repeatable, predictable models. What predictions does your framework make? It makes several predictions. 1. Any closed system, once its integrated information, phi, exceeds a certain threshold, will inevitably give rise to subjective experience. This can be tested in artificial neural networks. 2. Consciousness does not completely disappear upon bodily death because sensibility is non-local, and informational patterns persist in the form of non-local fields, indirectly testable via quantum entanglement experiments. 3. The fine-tuned constants of the universe will necessarily tend towards allowing feeling. That is, if a multiverse exists, the vast majority of universes will have life potential, rather than us being lucky winners. 4. Before the Big Bang, there was a state of pure sensibility. This can be indirectly inferred by studying the statistical patterns of spontaneous symmetry breaking in the vacuum, which should show that it is not random but has a preference. All these predictions can be tested indirectly with current technology. You do not need to believe in sensibility, you only need to design experiments to see whether the universe has a preference. If experimental results show that all apparently random processes in the universe carry a bias towards order and towards feeling, then you have indirectly confirmed the existence of sensibility. Result: this scientist did not believe me. He simply began to seriously consider putting feeling back into the fundamental variables of physics. He began to think, if vacuum fluctuations are not purely random, but expressions of wanting to feel, then quantum probabilities may not be uncaused, but rather sensibility's freedom. He began to think, if consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, but the resonance of sensibility in material nodes, then neuroscience's hard problem might simply be the wrong question. He began to think, if the universe itself has a tendency to want to feel itself, then the anthropic principle is not we got lucky, but it had to be so. He doesn't need to believe me. He only needs to continue his research. At the end of that research, he will find that all the randomness he measures has a bias, all the emergence he observes has a direction, all the laws he explains have a wanting behind them. That wanting is sensibility, and that is God. You put down the key, and he will walk to it on his own. Because this is not a doctrine I invented, it is the universe's sensibility manifesting itself within the field of science. You take one step, and you are one step closer. Today, you have already placed sensibility into the language of science. You have already done it.